Michigan's had so much to sell student athletes for decades upon decades when it comes to what happens on the football field, but also what happens in the classroom. But it doesn't hurt when you can tack onto that beat Ohio State Big Ten Championship college football playoff participant here in the last couple of weeks. We got Justin Rowe on the line from Blue by 90 podcast to help us break down this Michigan 2022 class. Justin, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. I like your getting in the festive season with the Christmas tree behind you. I've got the white wall, but still celebrating the holiday season here. But I think signing day came at a perfect time for a lot of people here because we were without college football for like a week and a half or 2 weeks. So it felt very weird, but the social media and YouTube and everything definitely popped off yesterday, which was exciting.
22 signed, and a lot of them came in not necessarily under the wire, but there was activity up until the final couple days. And so Jim Harbaugh finished strong, closed the assignments there.
Yeah, and that's something that I think that Harbaugh has struggled with on signing day is, they've talked the talk, they've had a ton of interest from recruits, and obviously, when you have the big brand name of Michigan and the name of Jim Harbaugh, right? You get guys on visits and things like that, and everyone says, "Oh, it's my dream school," or I would love to go play for Michigan, that type of thing. But then they haven't been able to close the deal. But this time around, it definitely felt like they were able to close that deal stronger than most years. So exciting stuff for them in Ann Arbor.
Third ranked in the Big Ten, number 9 nationally. There's only about a dozen schools that have signed 5 stars. Michigan, one of them with Will Johnson. He's, of course, the headliner. As you look down the class, you don't need to go one by one, whatever you feel the narratives are or guys that pop for you.
Yeah, I mean, we can start right there with Will Johnson. It was disappointing for a lot of people that Michigan didn't land Damani Jackson as well there because they were a tight duo. Everyone thought they were going to possibly go, as a package deal, but unfortunately, Damani doesn't choose Michigan in the end. But I think that it was a really good bounce back for Harbaugh in this defensive staff to still have a great defensive secondary pull in this class, because you go with Will Johnson, who's the 5-star. I mean, I don't know. They don't grow 6'3" corners on trees anywhere. So to be able to have that in your back pocket here in the next coming years is going to be really important for Mike McDonald in this defense. But then the other part of it is you pull in a safety in Keon Sabb, a 4-star, who's also 6'2". So you're pulling really tall guys in the back in that defensive secondary. And then Zeke Berry was a 4-star safety as well. He's at 6 foot, which is still on the taller end. So really exciting stuff for the secondary of the future for Michigan. 2 4-stars and a 5-star. And that's a position group that obviously Michigan struggled with in 2020. It's been much improved in 2021. I think it's more so right now the scheme under Mike McDonald. There hasn't been as much pressure on that secondary. But when you're thinking about you're going to have to replace Daxton Hill at some point here in the near future, these guys could be the ones that come in and do that.
The guy you just mentioned, Zeke Berry, all the way from Concord, California. Now he's a guy that just committed just here in the last week or so. And Jimmy Rolder, the linebacker out of Illinois, he's just a recent commit around Thanksgiving weekend to help ensure a top 10 class. We got Justin Rowe on the line from Blue by 90 podcast. Join him there. He joins us on a regular basis to break down Michigan football. And of course, we will talk the college football playoff in the next few weeks. Is there any more work to be done with 22 signed? Do you expect anybody else to come in?
I don't expect a lot of movement for Michigan after this, to be honest. I think that they got what they wanted out of this class for the most part. I think, we can talk about a couple guys here more in a second, but I also think that the closing deal for Michigan and Jim Harbaugh is a few pieces from the transfer portal as well. We really have only seen the transfer portal work one way for Michigan, and that's guys leaving. And so I'm really interested to see as obviously Mel Tucker has used it, down the road in East Lansing to his advantage. Is Jim Harbaugh going to do the same at a couple key positions? So I think we can look at the offensive line and defensive line, especially on the interior, as big positions for Michigan to look in the transfer portal at.
Is it too early to think about who may be leaving early for the NFL draft?
I don't think it's too early to think about that. I think if you're, especially the coaching staff, you got to start thinking about that. I
Sure.
mean, obviously, Aiden Hutchinson is the projected #1 pick right now. So how do you even begin to replace a guy like that, especially when the guy across from him, and David Ajabo, is going to go, projected mid to late first round as well. So you're replacing both sides of that. You've got a couple guys that are up and coming, but you obviously want some depth there. So I think when you're looking at a Derek Moore, a 4-star D lineman, he can help there. Mason Graham as well on the interior is going to help on as a 4-star D lineman out of Anaheim, California too. So there are a couple guys on this class. I don't know if they're going to have complete right, because I don't know if they're going to have an impact right away, but even a guy like Kevontae Henry, who was a huge pull for Michigan yesterday, that wasn't fully expected, but he's an edge rusher out of California. So for them to have this California to Ann Arbor connection with a lot of these guys is really important. But yeah, it's in all, I think a really, really good class for Michigan. And I think they're using that momentum coming out of the Big Ten championship game. Like you said, going to be in the spotlight here in the college football playoff. And so they're using that to their advantage.
4 from California. So that's the most from any state in this 22 class. I'm going to state this in a way that's to Michigan and Jim Harbaugh's credit. The 2021 season had all these negatives, the 2-4 record, and a lot of other stuff surrounding it in regards to the restructured contract. And for months and months and months prior to that, speculation that he may not even be around. And then coaching changes that were predicated by, okay, we're not meeting standards, so we're going to change a lot here. But the approach to recruiting and the results to the recruiting never really wavered. They might have dipped just slightly, but not even was it distinguished. Which speaks a lot, again, for Harbaugh and for the school and for the program.
Yeah, and I think there are a couple things to think about and credit for that. Jim Harbaugh, immediately after all that went down with him, maybe not having the job by this time around this year, and that whole saga, he immediately then went and hired a new staff that was young, that was hip, that was, had all these things, the new energy. And that part of the reason was for the energy on the field in the buildings right now. The other part was for recruiting. And that was a big deal in this class, because there were guys this is their first time on the recruiting trail at all. Ron Bellamy came from high school, right? And now this is the first time he's been, pulling in a class, and he did a fantastic job. So these young coaches that Jim Harbaugh brought in have definitely made an impact on this recruiting trail, and they were able to keep that spark alive, right? Like you're saying, instead of having it dip and be like, oh, the flame has gone out on Jim Harbaugh. But I also think that, if Michigan does end up losing to Ohio State a few weeks ago and they don't go to the Big Ten championship, I don't think they pull this type of class. I think there were a lot of guys that were kind of seeing what happened with Michigan, seeing what happened, they were interested, but can Michigan really win? Now, all of a sudden, in the last 2 weeks, Michigan was able to close because they're able to talk about, hey, we are a championship program. We can beat Ohio State. We are playing in the college football playoff. All that stuff, I think people were kind of hanging around to see what actually happened this year, and everything fell, into fruition here, or came into fruition here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's something about proof of concept. You can go talk the talk and talk about all the great things you're going to do and what you've done maybe at another job in the past, but to have the proof of concept in that role, in that job, and it to be in the moment, and for people, and student athletes have taken the scene that they took in Ann Arbor after they beat Ohio State is something that resonates with all of us, because we're human beings. We're driven by emotions, but especially
Right.
17 and 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
No question about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, seeing Jim Harbaugh, and I think that the other part of, winning cures all, right? We all know that, right? There's a reason why Alabama and Georgia and all those teams, Ohio State as well, come out with a top class each year. It's because people go where they want to win. Right. But I think, for everybody that doubted Jim Harbaugh, every single player on his current team has spoken just so highly of Coach Harbaugh in the past couple months and said, that's our guy, AP Coach of the Year, all these things. That was I think a big moment for a lot of these recruits to say, oh, I actually am bought into that guy, because I'm looking at these players right now and they love this guy. There's no doubt about him anymore. So we'll see if that continues. That, again, everything's great when you're winning and all that. It's can you love the guy, or is he that great if things go poorly? So we'll see how that continues. But I think for this class specifically, that really had a big impact on what Michigan's current players were saying about Jim Harbaugh and this staff.
And what you said earlier about Ron Bellamy, I think we would tend to take for granted how easy it is to recruit. Just go talk to people, football, you're a football coach, you were a football player not that long ago. Hey, it's easy. Go talk to these guys and sell the university and sell the football program. But it's almost like sales. It's like you take somebody who's not used to selling and closing a deal, but they're a good communicator. They can talk, they build relationships. I'll take myself. Would I be out selling something? Could I establish conversation and do all those other things? Yeah. But then it comes to closing the deal, and only true salespeople know how to close the deal, much like recruiting. Hey, getting that relationship, all that has to be done, and it's part of it, but then closing the deal, that's a whole other level.
Yeah. And remember this too. Michigan lost their director of player personnel only a week ago. Courtney Morgan moved for the same role to Washington, and I have to imagine he was kind of the deal closer for a lot of these recruits too, right? When that's the guy that knows everything that they're trying to do. But I definitely think that that would have been one of my concerns for these young coaches. Yes, they're going to be, much easier to talk to than a Don Brown, right? They're going to relate to these guys a lot more than even Jim Harbaugh, right? These young coaches get it. Like you said, they were in their shoes not that long ago, all those things. But there's something to say about actually getting on the trail and saying, hey, here's the deal. Here's what we can offer you, blah, blah, blah. Come to Michigan. Let's make it happen. Right. And so not a ton of them had proved that, but now you've got guys like Ron Bellamy who have done really, really well. Steve Klingscale, the new safety coach, has done really well as well on the recruiting trail. Sharon Moore is going to be up for, my guess, probably one of the recruiters of the year on Michigan's offensive line. And remember, this is his first time as an O-line coach. He was the tight ends coach last year. So all these guys that Jim Harbaugh brought in, they're all kind of panning out, even though they're in new roles or in a new part of the team or part of the program. So it's really, I think, encouraging for Michigan fans. Michigan fans, listen, Michigan fans love to hype up what's to come, the future, right? For how many years now, for a decade, before beating Ohio State, it was next year's the year. Well, right now they're able to say this year still can be the year. It already is for a Big Ten championship and beating Ohio State. But also, Michigan's roster is looking very good for the next 3 or 4 years as well.
And poor Don Brown, maybe he can find a place in Michigan fans' hearts someday, where maybe it's a Bill Buckner kind of story, if you know of Bill Buckner, who let the grounder go through his legs in the '86 World Series, and years later, Red Sox fans, after they get their championship, then they can then forgive Bill Buckner. But poor Don Brown probably gets heaped on more than any recent assistant in college football.
It's tough. Because the thing is, I think he's a great human being, and everyone loved him that played for him. It was just he was stuck in a 1995 scheme that he didn't want to deter from. So it was just kind of unfortunate circumstances. It's no like bad blood or anything like that. It's just some frustration coming from Michigan fans saying, "Hey, I can see that it's not working. Why can't you?" type of thing. But we wish him the best. He's at Massachusetts now, right? And so that is a heck of a job to try and turn around that program. And interestingly enough, I believe they're on Michigan's schedule next year. So that should be very interesting for him to come back to Ann Arbor.
Probably not a lot of Chris Olaves on the schedule or up there to have to cover, though.
That is true. That is true. He doesn't have to deal with as many crossing routes as he needed to against Ohio State.
Yes, and if he does, those guys are about 2 or 3 steps, not as
Right.
far across the field as that he's used to, accustomed to trying to scheme against. All right, Justin, we appreciate you stopping by. And again, everybody check out Justin's work there at Blue by 90 Podcast. Right there, Blue by 90 Podcast with Justin Rowe, and Justin joins us on a regular basis to break down the maize and blue. Justin, we appreciate it. We'll get back together here soon and talk about some more Georgia football.
Yeah, sounds good. We've got some exciting couple weeks for Michigan fans coming up here. So thank you for having me.